And let us hop right to it. We left off last week. We are now 3 weeks in, and we are 1.5 chapters into the Megillah of Esther. Last week we were discussing this plan to gather all the girls from all over the kingdoms, and how Esther gets taken into the harem under the watch of Haggai. Okay, now, Lo higida Esther es Amma. You can see the sources in Hebrew or in English. Esther did not tell over her people, Bes Moladatav, nor where she was born. Ki Mordechai tziva aleh asher lo sagid, because Mordechai commanded her. Oh, you got the wrong sheets again. Alrighty, this time don't look at the sheets. You don't have my sheets and you don't have your sheets. So just ignore the sheets and trust me. Hopefully I'll say the truth. I'll read the verses as they are. Okay, so Esther did not tell over her nation, nor where she was born, for so Mordechai had commanded her. Mordechai told Esther to keep it secret because, first of all, we'll get to a bunch of reasons why in a moment. Esther was concerned, how am I going to keep secret that I'm Jewish, and I'm going to start... there's a lot of laws that Jews follow, Shabbos, kosher, etc. How am I going to be able to stay in the royal palace without telling anybody why I'm doing what I'm doing, which are going to be disruptive? But as we spoke about last week, she entered into this vegan, raw foods diet, and that was Haggai was willing to give that to her, so she started on this diet of nuts and seeds and whatnot, and she became known as the nutty candidate. No. Okay. And that just became known as her diet. And also, remember, she had 7 maids, so she was able to keep track of Shabbos. So she ended up keeping the secret of who she was for 9 years. Wow. We don't realize how long the story of the Megillah takes place, but she gets taken to the house of the king in the 3rd year of Achashverosh's reign, and she's there in the palace for 9 years. Could you imagine what it is for a great woman, a prophetess, a holy and divine woman, to be stuck in the palace of a barbaric, anti-Semitic, cruel bear of a king for 9 years? And she doesn't break once. And it's only in the 12th year of Achashverosh's reign that finally she has to step forward to save the Jewish people, and she tells of her identity. Now, why did Mordechai tell Esther to keep her identity private? Number one, Mordechai had seen in a prophetic vision that there was an important reason for Esther to be in the palace. Now, if Esther was known to be a Jew, and Achashverosh was the anti-Semite that he was a Jew hater, he never would have married her in the first place. So for whatever reason, Esther was supposed to be there. Mordechai said, don't let it be known that you're a Jew. That's number one. Number two, Mordechai also did not want anybody to know that she was related to him, because people then would not speak openly in front of her, knowing that she was related to this Jewish advisor, and people would not speak openly in front of him because he was related to the queen, which of course would would result in him not being able to divulge the plan of Big Son and Serash, which we'll see at the end of the day today, which was to assassinate the king. So it was very important that nobody knew of their relation. Now Providence, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, also did not want Esther to reveal her identity for a few different reasons. There were 2 main things that the genocidal decree was meant to fix. Number one, the genocidal decree that Haman would proclaim upon the Jews was a punishment for the Jews serving the idols of a Nebuchadnezzar. Now, when the Jews bowed down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar, they only did it outwardly. Inside, they were true to God, but they had a gun being held to their head. Well, actually, it wasn't a gun back then. It was probably a sword or a scarab, perhaps a scarab. In any case, so they were concerned, or a scimitar. How about that? Maybe it was a scimitar, okay? In any case, they were concerned for their life, and that's why they did the bowing down to the idol, and therefore it would be highly, it was wrong of them, but at the end of the day, it was only something they did on the outside. So God, therefore, said, you know what? I'll pretend on the outside like I'm about to have you all destroyed. On the inside, God internally never had any plans to hurt the Jewish people, but on the outside, it appeared to them. So it's exactly measure for measure. Again, they served idols of Nebuchadnezzar on the outside while internally remaining faithful. In response, God always works with the world, measure for measure. In response, God on the outside appeared to abandon them and be ready to let them die in a genocidal gore fest engineered by Haman, when in reality, God never had any intention to allow anything to happen to the Jewish people. Another reason why they were going to be in this predicament was because they had enjoyed the feast of Achashverosh. That was very wrong of them, as we spoke about in the last few weeks. So because of that, when they were faced with the decree of Haman, if you remember, Esther ends up saying to them, gather all the Jews, lech kenosis kol hayudim, gather all the Jews, vitsumu alai, and fast on my behalf, and they should not eat and they should not drink for 3 days. The fasting that the Jews did for 3 days was an atonement to the partaking in the eating and drinking at the party of Achashverosh. Now, if Esther did not become the queen because her identity was known, then two things would have happened. Number one, she wouldn't be there to save the Jews at the end of Haman's decree. And number two, she wouldn't be there to make the recommendation that the Jews fast for 3 days, which was the proper repentance needed by them for their sin. Hence, God also did not want Esther to divulge her identity. And here's the most interesting one, and a very important one for us too, because it's very important in our life. The last reason the Mamloes gives for why Hashem did not want Esther to reveal her identity is as follows. When a parent teaches a child to walk, so what do? They prop the child up and they go back a few steps. Come here, come here, come here, come here. And if the kid is successful, what do? They go back a few more steps. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. The way you train a child is by moving further and further away from them and letting them see that they can walk all the way to you. God was training the Jewish people to walk to Him, even in exile, even when He wasn't supporting them like He was in Israel. Had they known that Esther was there protecting them the whole time, they would not have felt like they were all alone. They would have felt like they had a crutch. They were walking with a crutch. Esther, the queen, the Jewish queen in the palace. Therefore, Esther did not reveal her identity. And therefore, when God was stepping back from the Jewish people, all right, let's see what you do now. I'm going to leave go of you. What are you going to do? Suddenly the world gets chaotic. You're on shaky ground. Genocidal decrees go against you. Where are you going to turn for your salvation? To me or to the other way? When I leave go and walk back, are you going to walk to me or are you going to walk away? This is a very important lesson for our own lives when we go through difficulties. That is what's going on. God is saying, Babala, not Babala. God is saying, Babala, my dear child, I know you can do this. I'm going to step back now a little bit. And you're going to feel suddenly like a child. You're losing your balance. The whole world is turning on you. Everything's getting shaky beneath you. Can you walk to me? I know you can. Turn to me and walk to me one deliberate step at a time and you'll get there. That's what we need to feel like when we're going through difficulties. God is literally just stepping a little bit further and saying, you got this. Leiby, you got this. You can do this. Come to me. Next. Ubechol yom v'yom, and every day Mordechai mishalech lefnei chatzar beis hanashim. Mordechai was walking before the court of the woman's house, ladas es shlom Esther or ma'yeh ba, to see what was going on with Esther and what was being done with her. Mordechai kept a close watch over Esther. He had a number of concerns. Number one, he was afraid that the king would force her to reveal her background. He was always hovering nearby. Now, normally men were not allowed anywhere near the royal harem. And the people who worked in the royal harem, as we said before, were eunuchs. However, because Mordechai was a very influential leader, he was allowed to be near the harem. And of course, he wouldn't specifically go over to Esther every day. Hi, how you doing today? He would just walk through the royal harem, but keeping his eyes and ears open. He had a few concerns. He was concerned about her health. The Mamloy said something fascinating. The Mamloy said that after Esther was taken into the palace of the king, she experienced a deep depression. And he was concerned that she would waste away. What's fascinating about this is that we don't usually see mention of mental health in commentaries on the Torah. But here's a fascinating example where the Mamlois brings this, that he was concerned simply because she was in a deep depression for months after she was taken to the king. It's like PTSD. Here you are living in the house of the person you love and admire, and you're snatched up and taken away and dumped into a harem with girls whose only goal is to try to win over the king using whatever they can? What a shock. What a traumatizing experience. And Esther was going through a depression. So Mordecai just felt, I have to go through here. Let her see me every day. Next, Mordecai was also concerned that the other girls in the royal harem would harm Esther. Esther was such a beauty. She was so beautiful that the other women might get jealous of her. She's going to be the one. She's going to end up getting the king. Let's go scratch up her face. Let's go pour acid on her face. I mean, people, it's amazing. People can get really, really nasty when it comes to, I mean, I wrote a Shabbos email a couple weeks ago, if any of you guys read it. It's about people killing dogs. Your dog is going to be best in show at the Westminster, at the Crufts. I'm going to kill your dog. Something called noodling at dog shows. People will literally pass by a dog with like a scissors in their sleeve, and as they go by the dog, they'll just snip a big tuft of hair. You have a beautiful, perfectly groomed poodle, or any other perfectly groomed dog, perhaps an Afghan, or some other form of dog, and they just go and they just cut off a tuft of hair. Now it looks weird. It's got this big bald spot. Just done out of spite. I don't want your dog to win. I want my dog to win. Now imagine when it's their own life. They want to be the queen. Forget the dog. If people are willing to kill a dog because it might win a show, or it did win a show even, in spite after it won the show, when you're now competing for the prize of queen, and she's the most beautiful woman in the harem, she's got some serious security challenges. So Mordecai felt it necessary to go there every day, just make sure everything was secure. Ubagia Torah Na'ara v'Na'ara, when it came time, the turn of each maiden, Lavo al Melech Achashverosh, to come to King Achashverosh, Miketz Hayosla Kedas Hanashim. When it was completed to being done to her, what was the law of the women? Shnei Masar Chodesh, for 12 months, Kikain Yimlu'u Yemei Tamrukehem, for so was the amount of time they would get anointed. Shisha Chadashim B'Shemen Hamor, V'Shisha Chadashim B'Samim U'Tamrukei Anashim. 6 months with myrrh oils, and 6 months with sweet odors and other ointments of the women. Now all the other girls, they had one goal in mind. Become the queen. That's all they wanted to do. And they went through incredible lengths. Now in those days, by the way, already, the custom generally was engagement would last 1 year, or betrothal, they would call it back then. And during that 1 year, the girl would outfit herself with all the things that she would need for the wedding. All the gowns, all the proper makeups and applications, her chest full of clothing, whatever she needed, her bureau, her what?
Dowry.
Her dowry, there we go. But when it came to these girls, it was even more. There was a 12-month spa treatment. Could you imagine that? Sounds like fun. Actually, probably not, because it says 6 months with oil of myrrh. Myrrh, M-Y-R-R-H, of course, being our favorite spice. But at a certain point, it's like, hey guys, what are we doing today in the spa? Let me check your schedule. Yeah, you're going to be doing the myrrh oil treatments. But I did that yesterday. Yeah, I know. And you'll be doing it for the next 132 days. But I've been doing it for 50 days already. Yeah, I know. The myrrh treatments, they take a while to sink in. Yeah, why don't you head on down to the myrrh oil bath. So while it sounds amazing, 12-month spa, when you think that 6 months of it was with myrrh oil treatments, it's probably a little bit on the extreme side. We'll see a few reasons why that happened. And then in the next 6 months, the myrrh oil would soften up the skin and give it a shine and a glow and make the skin incredibly, incredibly beautiful. Then there will be 6 months of cosmetics and fragrances. You have to figure out which fragrance works best for which woman. Different people's biochemistry is every person's different, and the fragrances would interact differently with different people's skin. Very, very uniquely tailored spa. But there were two more reasons why they were going through this 12-month period. The first one was that Haggai, the chief of the harem, was very carefully recording everything that was going on to these women. And he was looking for signs that a woman might have feminine health problems. Because if she had those irregularities or whatever it was, it would mean that she would be unlikely to be able to bear a royal child, and that woman would get disqualified right away. So they were watching the women over a long period of time to see that they had the proper optimal health. Another reason, fascinatingly, is that this is so interesting, this goes back so far, is a health quarantine. Remember that these women came from 127 kingdoms all over the world. Different nationalities have different viruses and illnesses that are most commonly prevalent there. Look at what happened in America. Right? When the explorers came to America, when the pilgrims, the Puritans, whatever it was, their bodies, after years of being exposed to levels of smallpox, was able to handle smallpox. Not every European who got smallpox died of smallpox. Some did, of course. But over hundreds and hundreds of years of exposure to smallpox, the Europeans had built up somewhat of a resistance, which the Native Americans had no resistance to smallpox. And when the Europeans came over, 90% of the Native American population was wiped out by illness. And forget the whole allegations. Did they put out smallpox blankets? Did they not? At the end of the day, smallpox is a virus. Eventually, if you have a bunch of Europeans and they all have smallpox running through them or running around them, and they get exposed, eventually you would have gone to a Native American, even if they didn't put out blankets, right? Meaning, if you're around the population long enough, you're gonna, and all you need is like one Native American or two Native Americans to catch smallpox, and it would have spread to the whole population anyway. So I'm not trying to, this is not like white absolution moment, where I'm absolving the white people of guilt over the smallpox blankets, which are very unclear from historical perspective. Anyway, the point is that if it was, the Native Americans, just by dint of sharing space with the Europeans who had this defense, would have gotten this smallpox anyway, and the decimation would have occurred either way, whether or not there were blankets involved. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, fine. Okay, now, the idea was bring these women in for 12 months, because we don't know. You get a woman here coming from India, a woman coming from Ethiopia, a woman coming from Arabia, a woman coming... Who knows what kind of illnesses they have in their countries, and could be some of them lie dormant for a while. They go in cycles. So the idea was keep the women for a year in the royal harem, where they were also being watched for any type of medical outbreak, which could then, God forbid, which could then give the king an illness. So it was a very interesting thing. It's a very early version of a quarantine system. Okay, now, and with this, the girl would come to the king when it was finally her turn. Whatever she asked was given to her. To come with her from the house of the king, from the house of the women, from the royal harem to the house of the king. She would come in the evening. And she would go back in the morning. To the house of the women. But this time she would not go back to the main harem with Haggai. She would go back El Yad Shashgaz Sris HaMelech. She would go to Shashgaz, who was another one of the king's servants, and now he was Shomer HaPilagshim. Shashgaz was the person who guarded the royal concubines. As we'll see in a moment, before she had lived with the king ever, she was in the royal harem. Now she'd be transferred to the royal concubine palace. Lo savo od al melech, she would not come back to the king ever again. Ki im chafetz ba melech v'nikra b'shem, unless the king desired her and called her by name. Now, for starters, some of the girls were so well treated in the harem, they didn't want to leave. Like, hey, it's really my turn to go to the king? How about we do another one of those myrrh oil baths tomorrow? I'm kind of feeling it right now. I'm living here, it's great, I've never had it this good. 3 square meals a day, spa treatments all year round. I'm good. So some of them had to be enticed with gifts to go to the king, but most of them not. Most of them desperately wanted to go before the king because they were roaring to get their chance to be the new queen. Now, the king was very lavish with the girls who came. And when the one night they came to the king, she would be treated like a queen. whatever she asked for was given to her. If she felt that music would enhance her beauty and her appeal to the king, she could say, I want a full orchestra behind the screen playing for me this particular music when I go before the king, and she would have it. She could say, my personality goes well with sushi. I want a sushi chef. I want a beautiful sushi bar. I'm going to serve the king sushi. I'm going to introduce him to sushi, which is my local native food, and I'm going to woo him that way. It's going to mix the sushi and my beauty, be beautiful, with a lot of umami. Now, some people would say, I want a troupe of comedians or trapeze artists to first sort of sport before us, before me and the king, withdraw to the chambers. Whatever they asked for, they would get. They would get any kind of clothing. They could request this type of gown or that type of gown. The greatest designers, Dior and Armani and Prada and Gucci, Gabbana, everybody's all lined up. Who's doing the red carpet at the Achashverosh palace? Now, one of the reasons why the king was so lavish with these women was to help bolster his public opinion. There were a lot of people who were angry at him, because you have to remember what it was like for these girls. You're snatched from your parents' house against your will. Right? It was designed like that. We spoke about that last week. You're snatched from your parents' house against your will. You're shut off from the rest of the world in the royal harem for a year. 6 months of which you have to go through myrrh oil treatments. But you have no more contact with the rest of the world for a year. And then finally you get one night with the king. And if the king doesn't like you, you're done for life. You become a royal concubine, which means you're never allowed to get married again. Remember, it's inappropriate for a commodore and the king to share the same woman, because the woman's going to compare and say, the commodore was kind of actually better than the king. Does that, God forbid, we can't allow that. So once a woman was with the king, she would never, so these women, you have to remember, if they did, and the majority of them failed, because this practice went on for years. Esther doesn't get called up at the first time, the first moment. This practice goes on for years, for roughly 3 years, 4 years before the king pulls in and finally gets Esther. If you think about it, every night a different woman, 365 women, times 3 years, 4 years. We're talking about 1,000 women who their entire life was just one night with the king and then that's it. Never again. No marriage, no children, no family, nothing. You were pulled against your will. So there was a lot of ill will in the kingdom towards the king for this decree. So the least he could do is make the girl feel like a queen that one night, make it as magical as possible. Now, none of the girls were rejected outright. Achashverosh wouldn't, and everyone would leave in the morning feeling like, I think I got it. I think I nailed the job, right? Because he would never say to the girl right then, get out of my palace. Every single girl would walk away feeling like, wow, he's going to pick me. But he would actually send her right to the concubine palace. There, each girl was given a specific palace name. It was like a registration system. And part of the reason for this was that he didn't want them to try to sneak back in to the royal harem and try to give it a second go. I spent the first night with the king, and now I know the king does not like cucumbers. We'll not try that again. Whatever it is. Or he doesn't like sushi. He doesn't like music. He doesn't like symphonies. That was a disaster. He seemed very distracted the whole time the symphony was playing. So I'm not doing it with I'm not bringing a symphony. I'm going to sneak back in, but this time I'll do it differently. So that was not allowed. There was concern that girls would do this. Because remember, girls were dying to get into this role of queen. So they made a law. First of all, every girl on the way out was given a specific palace name. That's what it says. If the king did want her, she would be called by her palace name, Specimen 48. No, God forbid. I hope it was better. I hope it was better than that. In any case, but he would call her by name, and otherwise, if she tried to sneak back in again, she would be put to death. Okay, yeah. Most girls were willing to do almost anything to win this throne, and of course, ironically, Esther has no interest in it whatsoever. Ubahagia Torah Esther bas Avichail dod Mordechai. When the time came, the turn of Esther, the daughter of Avichail, whose uncle was Mordechai. The daughter of Avichail, the uncle of Mordechai. Right. So her father's name was Avichail, who was the uncle of Mordechai. Mordechai was her father's nephew, which made them cousins. Asher lokach lo labas, that Mordechai had taken Esther as in his daughter. Lovo al hamelech, to come before the king. Lo biksha davar, she didn't ask for anything. Ki im es asher yomar, Haggai sris hamelech shomer Hashem, except for what Haggai, the servant of the king, insisted. Vati Esther noses chen beinei kol re'eha. And Esther was a charm and a beauty and gained favor in the sight of all those who had seen her. Mordechai raised Esther to have good traits, and she was not a boastful person. She was not sitting there boasting about my beauty. Oh yeah, bring me this and bring me that. It's going to make me so beautiful. No, nothing. She said, I don't want anything. Furthermore, she identifies herself as Avichail, Bas Avichail, the daughter of Avichail. The word Avichail is made up of two names. It's Avichail. The father of Chail is a host, like an army, a legion. She said, I'm Esther. My father, who I never met, by the way, because she was born an orphan. Her father died when she was conceived of, and her mother died when she was born. So she never met her father, but she knew what her father's name was. His name was Avichail because he was the father of a legion of good deeds. Me? Who am I? I'm not trying to be Vashti. I'm trying to be Esther, the daughter of Avichail, this man who was a father of so many good deeds. The cousin of Mordechai, the great, great Jewish sage who raised me. I don't need this position. So she spurned the beautiful gowns. She spurned all the costly makeup. She said, I don't need anything. I'm just going to go in like this. Haggai, of course, was horrified. The king you're going to come in looking so plain Jane. The king is going to have me executed. What are you doing? What are you sending me a girl? I thought I told you, make these girls beautiful. So he insisted on some very basic essentials, but basically she went in almost with nothing. It's a very important lesson. Esther did not depend on her beauty. She did not try to use her beauty. Yet it was her beauty that ended up her saving the entire nation. Vashti depended on her beauty, and at the end of the day couldn't even save herself. Now Esther's appeal was universal. It wasn't ethnic. It wasn't like one group liked her and some group didn't. Everybody loved Esther. People from countries throughout the kingdom would assume that she was one of theirs. They all thought she was one of theirs. Oh yeah, she's an Indian. Oh no, she's one of ours. She's a Persian. Oh no, she's one of ours. She's an Ethiopian. Oh no, they all thought she was one of theirs. Every tongue in the palace was filled with praise for her. Why is this? Why was Esther, no says chen, be'enei kol ro'eha, garnering favor in all the eyes of all those who saw her? Listen to this amazing lesson which will teach you how to be the most popular person in your whole community. You got it, guys? You ready? Here's the trick. How was Esther so popular? How did she get so much grace and affection from other people? There's an important rule. There's a verse that says, Kemayim panim el hapanim, kain lev ha'adam el ha'adam. Like water, when you look in the water, the face that you look down with is the face that you see looking back up at you. So too is the heart of man to man. There's something about human emotions that it works like a mirror. If I'm suspicious of you, if I'm uncomfortable around you, you're going to be suspicious of me. You're going to be uncomfortable around me. If I'm very warm and open to you, you'll be warm and open to me. Esther was a great, great tzaddikas. She was a great righteous woman. She recognized that every single human being, no matter what creed, race, or color, was born, B'Tselem Elokim, was born with the image of God. She saw godliness in everyone, and therefore she loved everyone, no matter who, no matter what nationality, no matter what ethnic group, old, young, good, bad, or in between, she loved everyone, and people felt that. And that's why she was noses chen be'enei kol ro'eha. She garnered favor in all those who saw her. If we want to be more popular, if we want to feel more beloved by our people, we need to love other people more. And not because if we love other people more, they'll love us more. That doesn't work. That's really selfish, right? Meaning, we simply need to open up our hearts and love more and more and more. And the more we have that in us, the more people will feel automatically drawn to us. Vatilakach Esther beis hamelech Achashverosh El beis malchuso b'chodesh ha'asiri hu chodesh teves b'shnas sheva l'malchuso. Esther was taken to the king in the house, into the royal house, in the 10th month, which is the month of Teves, in the 7th year of his reign. Now remember, Vashti was killed in the 3rd year of his reign. This is now in the 7th year of his reign, 4 years later. For 4 years, Achashverosh lived without a wife, from the 3rd year of his reign until the 7th year. Now the king actually had noticed Esther much earlier. Remember we said that Esther's beauty was legendary. People were talking about her in the kingdom, in the streets. When she came into the royal harem, she made an immediate effect. Ahasuerus had heard about her and had sort of observed her from behind the scenes and was incredibly attracted to her. But he said, this time I'm not rushing in. Look what happened to me last time when I acted impetuously with Vashti. Didn't work out well. This seems to be the right one. I'm going to slow it down. So he observed her from behind the scenes for a long time before finally looking for any character defects, and then finally said, okay, it's time for me to have my audience, so to speak, with Esther. Interestingly, there was another king checking out Esther during that time, and that is the king in heaven. Ahasuerus was only looking for a wife. Hashem in heaven was looking for a redeemer of his people. And he wanted her to remain in the harem for a long time as well, to see if she would have any character defects that would come out. But no, she remained virtuous and pure the entire time. She was in the harem despite it being a place of great competition and physicality. She remained above the fray, and God was comfortable with her as well. She was pleasing in the eyes of man and God. Now providence then set it up that Ahasuerus, it's very interesting, Ahasuerus brings her right into the Beis Malchuso. Instead of, there was a place in the palace where normally they would have the one night sort of trial with Ahasuerus for the women, but when it came Esther's turn, he actually brought her straight to the royal palace. And it was almost like he's saying to her, like, the king is choosing you to be his queen, because like you're not being treated like everybody else. She did not need to spend the night with the king as a test. He did not do that to her. It was very interesting. Providence also set it up that her first encounter, Esther's first encounter with Ahasuerus, should be during the month of Teves, which is the coldest month of the year, which is the time when the human body most appreciates warmth and closeness, which would make her that much more appealing to Ahasuerus. Now when it was time for Esther to go, listen to the fascinating politics behind the scene in the palace. Every courtier, everybody working in the court of the king, wanted to be the one who would bring Esther to the palace. They were all so confident that Esther would be chosen that they all wanted to be the one to sort of convey her to the king. Because that would sort of give them a little bit of extra merit in the eyes of the king. Oh yeah, that's the guy who brought me my wife. So they were bribing. There was like a bidding war. There were like corruption and bribery going on. Everyone vying for this position. I want to be the person bringing Esther to the queen. Because they were so confident in the palace that she would be the one who ended up being the queen. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his eyes above all the maidens. And he immediately put her crown and made her the queen, as opposed to the plan which would have been to sort of make her sweat it out a little bit. Now, interestingly enough, Ahasuerus understood that Esther was not, Esther did not desire to be the queen. For starters, this girl walks in with barely any makeup on. Right, now Ahasuerus by now already is starting to feel a great sense of regret, because for the last 4 years, he had been trying out a new girl every night, and it felt incredibly shallow and depressing to him. And it was really not the sort of glorious escapades he was hoping it was going to be, and he was feeling very down, and suddenly here comes this girl. She's plain, she's not made up, she's not trying to be coy or gain favor. There was such a beauty to that alone. There's something very repulsive or repugnant when someone's throwing themselves at you in an untoward way. Ahasuerus was sick and tired. 4 years of every night women trying to win him over. And this girl comes in. There was like that appeal. And she's not dressed up particularly, beautiful. And she comes in. He's like trying to make small talk with her. Hey, where are you from? Yeah. No. Where do you come from? It's nice to meet you. Where are you from? Yeah. It's like, wow, this woman is not even trying to engage in conversation. But that all the more made her more appealing. After years of women throwing themselves at him, here's this woman who it makes it intriguing and appealing, impressive. And the fact that she didn't ask for anything, like everyone else was so selfish, coming with orchestras and golden clothing, and people would ask for ridiculous things, and this girl comes, simple, royal, regal, quiet. So he said, that's it. Usually girls are either beautiful internally or externally, but not always both. This girl had both. This girl had everything, and he falls madly in love with her. And she's immediately installed in Vashti's quarters and given all of her privileges. Even though Esther was of questionable origin and Vashti was of royal bloodline, she was given all the same beautiful treatment you would give to a queen who was of royal bloodline. And there was a great big portrait of Vashti that had hung in Ahasuerus' room for the whole 4 years, and it was immediately taken down, and a portrait of Esther was put up in his room. And the king made a big feast for all of his servants and princes, Es Mishteh Esther. The Feast of Esther. We'll see what that means in a moment. And he gave gifts to the various provinces. And he gave bounty and gifts like fitting of a king. Now for starters, the king, remember what happened at the last feast. He's determined to show Esther, don't worry, he's got his new wife, he's madly in love. He wants to show her, not every feast of mine ends with, someone being burned alive, especially the queen. So he wants to make a party to sort of show her, I can do this in a proper way. Furthermore, the king gave tax holidays to all of his provinces. A lot of them had undergone considerable expenses getting their most beautiful women for his harem. Right? Think about it. It was 4 years, with 127 kingdoms. 4 years, it's like 1,200 days, a little more than 1,200 days. Every kingdom at least had to bring him 10 of their greatest, most beautiful women, if you do the math. There was a lot of expense spent. So he now rewarded all the kingdoms for giving him their most beautiful women, and he gave money and special gifts to those who have been involved in the search for the queen. Now the king wanted to invite everybody in Shushan again and make a big party. The queen said no. Listen to this brilliant thing that Esther said to him. So I know you want to make a big party for everyone in Shushan and show your new queen, but you have to remember that for the people in Shushan, coming to the king's party is often a very big burden. A lot of them are poor, and in order to go to the king's palace, you got to get dressed up, so they got to go. This is before the rental tuxedo, by the way. So you have to go and buy one. Right? Everyone bought tuxedos back then. Right? So you had to buy a tuxedo and a beautiful gown to come to the party of the king. That's an enormous expense. You had to hire a nice carriage to bring you to the palace. That's an enormous expense. Here's what I recommend to you to do, is what Esther says. Make a feast in my honor, but what you should do is declare a national holiday. Everyone gets off from work, and you send them provisions. Instead of having the provisions in your house and having them come to you, send the provisions to their home so they could all make feasts in their homes. And the king was very impressed, and he said, sure, that's what I'll do. And that's why it's called Es Mishteh Esther. This is the Feast of Esther, done in a much more considerate way, thinking about the lowly and the commoner person who couldn't have the money to come to another party and were going to debt to do so. It was a very sensitive party done right. That's what the party of Esther is. Now, the king was trying to get her to divulge her origin. That was very, very much on his mind. So he had a few different plans. Number one, make a party. Maybe she'll get drunk, right? Hey, somebody here has gotten drunk once and did something kind of stupid. Maybe she'll get drunk and do something stupid and tell me where she comes from. Number two, he's going to see who is she treating with extra care at the party, right? Because there's going to be people from all over. He's going to see she's very much spending extra time with this family. Ah, that's her family, but she didn't do that. She spent equal time with everybody, taking care of everybody. At the party, playing the great hostess. And the king pressed her and said, come on, where's your family? She said, look, I'm an orphan. My father died when he conceived of me, and my mother died at childbirth. The king tried another plan. He gave tax exemptions to all the lands. Now, if he gave tax exemptions to everybody in honor of Esther, think about what he would do for her family. So he's thinking, everyone gets a tax exemption. 2016, no federal tax. And you're from the Esther's family, you're going to be marching up to the White House saying, hey, wait, by the way, I'm from the family. Maybe you'll give me another exemption next year. Nobody stepped forward. The king tried another trick. He gave all kinds of gifts to the leaders of all the provinces, which raised up the esteem of Esther all across the kingdom, hoping that her family would start to boast. She's from our family. No one said anything. Then he tries the direct approach. He says to her, I want you to tell me about your nationality. She says to him, you tell me about your nationality. He says, I am a king of royal blood. She says, I am a queen of royal blood. He says, but from what nation do you come? And she says, listen, can I speak freely? Right, isn't that great? You always know what's coming next. And someone says, do I have permission to speak freely? Generally the answer is, you really don't have permission to speak freely, especially because what you're about to say is intensely going to be offensive to me. However, I probably have to say yes, so yes, you have permission to... Okay, anyway. So Esther says, do I have permission to speak freely? And the king said yes. He says, look, you're acting in a very... I'm very surprised that the king would act in this way. I'm his new queen and I'm uncomfortable divulging exactly my nationality right now. You will find this all out in due time. But I'm your new queen, and the last queen died for disobeying the king. Do I have to be concerned for myself? Are you going to kill me because I don't tell you my nationality? And the king was chastised, and he heard it. He said, okay, fine. Okay. And he said, Esther then said, I know probably your advisors are pressing you tremendously to figure out where I come from. But remember, your last advisors were the ones who recommended you kill your wife. I recommend you get some new advisors. The king says, who should I get? So Esther says, let me see, who should you get? Let me think about this. Yeah, the Jewish advisors, they're kind of good. King Nebuchadnezzar had a Jewish advisor named Daniel. King Balthazar had also Daniel. Cyrus, your father, had his chief advisor was a Jew named Zerubbabel. Hey, maybe you should get a Jewish advisor. They seem to be known around the world as people with clarity and great intellect. Ahasuerus says, that's not a bad idea. You're right. If I look back, all these other great kings had Jewish advisors. Are there any good Jewish advisors here? And she says, yeah. Come to think of it, I think there's this guy, Mordechai. Mordechai. I think he lives here in Shushan. I think he's pretty good. The word on the street is he's pretty good. And Mordechai gets called up, and Mordechai, that's why the next pasuk and says, and Mordechai was sitting in the gate of the king. The king was so impressed, he said, Mordechai, you will sit in the Shar HaMelech, sit in the gate of the king. Next, Ubihi kabetz besulos shenis, and when girls were being called again, Mordechai yoshev b'Shar HaMelech. And Mordechai is sitting in the king's gate. So we know why Mordechai is sitting in the king's gate, because Esther made the recommendation. What does this have to do with girls being called to the capital again? So here's what happens. Mordechai starts sitting in the king's gate where he becomes renowned as a very fair and good judge. The king comes to him one day and says, hey, Mordechai, I got an issue I wanted to talk to you about. I've got this problem. My wife doesn't want to tell me where she's from. What do you recommend that I do? So Mordechai says, listen to this. The Mordechai says, every woman's downfall is her jealousy. That's the key. Every woman wants to be the only woman that her husband's looking at. You got to go get some more women. And that's going to drive her mad. And she'll know that you're displeased with her because she hasn't told you her nationality. And that will get you to reveal her nationality. So sure enough, the king says, that's brilliant! Start bringing the girls again. The harem's filling up again. Now, Mordechai had a few reasons for this. Number one, people are starting to get suspicious of Mordechai and Esther. They seem to sort of know each other. What's going on over here? So when Mordechai recommends that more girls be brought in, possibly as a replacement for Esther, this, in the eyes of the nation, sets a distance between Mordechai and Esther. If she was really a Jew or from the Jewish people or related to Mordechai, Mordechai would never recommend bringing in more women. Let's say they find a better woman. So that sort of dispelled people's suspicions about a connection between Mordechai and Esther. Furthermore, Mordechai himself was concerned. Like, how is Esther going to live now that she's been chosen as the queen? How long is she going to be able to maintain her virtue in the palace of the king? Maybe it's not meant to be this way. So he figured if we get girls to come through again, it will be a test. If the king finds another girl and gets married to the other girl and drops Esther, then okay, it was a sign that she wasn't meant to be. But if no matter what, no matter how many girls they bring in, he still cannot find another woman who he loves as much as Esther, that's the sign that she really does belong here and she should remain here. Okay, now, many Jews knew the truth about Esther, but they didn't divulge it for two reasons. Number one, they knew that Achashverosh was a Jew hater. And if Achashverosh were to find out, they were concerned that if he found out that he was duped by a Jew, he would take it out on all the Jews. So they never wanted to say anything about Esther being a Jew. Number two, Mordechai became a very powerful advisor, and they were concerned that if they were to say anything, Mordechai's wrath would be brought upon them. Now, interestingly enough, according to the Mamloes, eventually the king puts one and one together, and he realizes that Mordechai and Esther have something here, and he confronts Esther. And Esther says, yes, I was raised by Mordechai, but that's because he's a righteous Jew, and he takes care of people who are in need. So that's fascinating. I never knew that before looking at Mamloes. Again, according to the Mamloes, at some point, Achashverosh becomes suspicious and confronts Esther, like, something's going on with you and Mordechai, and she says, yes, that's true. He did help me out. I'm an orphan girl, like I told you before. My father died at conception, my mother died at childbirth, and he, as a righteous man, raised me. Okay. Next, by Yamim Hahem, in those days, Mordechai Yoshev B'Shar HaMelech, and Mordechai is sitting in the king's gate, Katzaf, Bigsan, V'Seresh, Shnei Sarisei HaMelech, Mishomrei Asaf, Bigsan and Seresh, two of the king's servants who were guards of his apartment, plotted by Yivakshu, Lishloach Yad B'Melech Achashverosh. They wanted to kill Achashverosh. Okay, number one, the fact that Esther didn't tell her identity was very important over here. First of all, if Esther had revealed her identity, there's no way Bigsan and Seresh, the two people who are plotting to kill the king, would have ever said anything anywhere near Mordechai. Okay. But because they didn't know of this connection, they were more loose-lipped around Mordechai. Now, on top of that, they spoke Tarshishian, which was not a common language. If you remember, we said Mordechai was a member of the Sanhedrin. Every member of the Sanhedrin had to speak all 70 languages, so that if anybody came in from anywhere in the world for a court case, the judges would understand them speaking directly in their language, because when things are translated, stuff gets lost in translation. So the judges always need to hear the person giving their own testimony from their own mouth. So if you are on the highest court, the Sanhedrin, you have to speak all 70 languages. So Mordechai happened to know Tarshishian. Furthermore, if people knew that Mordechai and Esther were related, they might have thought that really Mordechai and Esther had conspired together with Bigsan and Seresh to assassinate the king, and then frame Bigsan and Seresh and make it look like they were heroes. You understand? So, because again, it was through Esther that it became known to the king. So if everyone knew they were related, they would say, look, Bigsan and Seresh were duped. They played the roop-de-loop, I don't know, one of the con men games, where you pretend like you're in with him, and really you're against him. So you go to Bigsan and Seresh, say, hey, let's go get the king, and then you end up divulging on Bigsan and Seresh, and you become heroes. Right? Smart thinking. Politics. One step ahead of one step, ahead of one step. So they didn't know that Esther and Mordechai were related, and that was very helpful. Now, in general, there was a lot of discontent in the kingdom right now, because a lot of the king's people had hoped that their daughters were going to get chosen as the queen. So many of the noblemen had hoped their daughter would get chosen, but it wasn't. It was this Esther, this virtual unknown, that we don't even know where she's from. So there was a general discontent. Haman, of course, was furious, because Haman had tried to get his daughter in. That didn't work. And Bigsan and Seresh had specific reasons for wanting to kill. The Gemara says one fascinating thing. Achashverosh was so enamored with Esther that he couldn't get enough of her. He would come to her all the time and come to her chambers. Now, Bigsan and Seresh's job was to guard those chambers where the king and queen would meet and be together. And they were like, we're working crazy overtime. When the king was married to Vashti, he would go visit her once a month. I don't know, whatever it was. We had a nice, cushy job. And now we're working every day, every night, all the time. This is insane. We're going nuts. Rise up out of the cubicle. Okay, no, that's not actually what they said. Next, they were also demoted. Bigsan and Seresh had originally been in charge of all the king's personal guard, and now they became regular guards. So they had been demoted. Furthermore, they were related to Vashti. Bigsan and Seresh were related to Vashti. So they were still pretty bitter at this whole situation. And finally, they were in cahoots somewhat with Haman, who was angry at the king for not having chosen his daughter. Vayivada davar leMordechai, and the matter was known to Mordechai. Again, he spoke their languages. Vayagei Esther HaMalka, and he told Esther Malka about the plot. Vatomer Esther LaMelech b'shem Mordechai, and Esther told the queen, the king, about this plot in the name of Mordechai. Now, this very important point. The Gemara says, Kol ha'omer davar b'shem omro mevi geula la'olam. Anyone who says something over in the name of the person you heard it from brings redemption to the world. Right? So you go to a class and you're very inspired, and then you come back home and you want to tell somebody about it. You say, I heard this amazing thing from Rabbi Smith, who said over from the Chazon Ish, who said, you always want to give credit. It's amazing. If you look at the Gemara will sometimes use 3 lines just to describe the authorship of a statement. Rabbi Bar Chana, the son of this one, who said in the name of this one, who said in the name of this one, who said in the name of this one. I mean, it's literally 3 or 4 lines the Gemara will just use to tell you the provenance of a statement in the Gemara. Give credit where credit's due. You bring redemption to the world. Esther told the fact that the plot was discovered about Mordechai, and that we're going to see plays a major role in the redemption and the whole story with Haman later. So always give credit where credit is due. If you heard something great, say it over in the name of the person you heard it over, and that will be your greatness. You don't need to be the one who thought of everything yourself, and Esther does that. The matter was investigated, it was found, and they were both hung on a tree. And it was written in the chronicles of the king before the king. So they tried to poison it. They were planning on poisoning the king. Mordechai divulged some of the details. It was discovered. The poison was tested. And sure enough, it was real poison. They were sentenced to death by impalement. Stakes were driven into the ground, and the 2 of them were placed onto those stakes, with the stakes going in through the bottom of their torso, all the way through the top, and then they were hung. There was a very clear message over here. You don't want to try to poison the king. It might not work out well. Okay, now, Esther summoned the royal scribes, and he said, you got to write down this that was revealed by Mordechai. The royal scribes happened to be Haman's children, and they were not about to write down great news about the Jews because they were Jew haters. And that's why Esther said, Ve'yikasev b'sefer divrei hamelech lifnei hamelech. I want the king there to make sure that you're writing down the story as it happened. The king, who's right now feeling very grateful, should be there to make sure it's written down exactly as it happens in the chronicles, as opposed to you guys saying, oh yeah, we'll take care of it, we'll do it when we get home. No. This is done in front of the king. You're a Jew hater. You're not going to write it properly unless you do it in front of the king. And that, my friends, concludes chapter 2. May you all have an amazing week, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.